CNN's Nick Paton Walsh is in the war zone for us in Ukraine. Nick, tell us about the newest Russian attacks and whether this is an attempt by Moscow to get revenge.
Yeah, while we don't have much information or evidence about the Russian accusations over the Kremlin, there are no doubt of a wave of drone attacks over the past days across all of Ukraine, with missiles often with them as well. Specifically, Kiev tonight saw an incident which appeared, in fact, to have been a misfunctioning Ukrainian drone, still part of a series of, indeed, drone attacks flown by Russia that have been hitting the capital and also the south of the country in Odessa as well. A lot of air defense taking those drones out on the way, but significantly worse results in Kherson, a city recently occupied by the Russians, where 24 people were killed by shelling across the country tonight. Concerns, sirens, certainly we just heard them here in Zaporizhia. Many worried that what happened around the Kremlin, whatever indeed it was, and the looming Ukrainian counteroffensive is going to lead to an uptick in yet more indiscriminate Russian bombing of civilian areas. Here's what we saw on the front lines today.
Out here, Moscow is losing, but never kindly. A shell flies into the old position this artillery unit used to sit in, just ahead of us. This unit of Ukraine's Marines keep moving, keep the Russians guessing. Every time they fire, there is a risk they will be spotted and hit back. All about increasing pressure on Russian lines as their counter-offensive looms, and that crackle in the distance of small arms fire, Ukrainians trying to take down the drones being used to spot them. Something rare is happening here, over the hills, far into which these shells land. It's indicated by the unusual sight of Russian jet trails in the sky, one launching a missile here. Russian forces are being pushed back from around the town of Avdiivka, we are told, from positions Russians have occupied for about 9 years, before last year's war even started.
І пішов продвиг. Нам вдалося йти в лівий фланг по Авдіївці. Тобто за пару днів ми прийшли до кілометра. Це доволі такий нормальний успіх. Кидають позиції, відходять, по чуть-чуть відходять. Сили в них менше і менше. Вони бачать, що їм не втриматися і відходять.
Whether this is a weak spot in Russia's lines or the counter-offensive in action, we do not know. But this pushback in the east is something these troops from the 128th Territorial Defence Brigade, training furiously, hope to replicate in the south, where the counter-offensive will likely focus. There is little shortage of ammunition here, quite the opposite. And they say the Russians already seem to know something from Ukraine is coming.
Їм страшно, тому вони стали більше стріляти по нашим позиціям. Це по-перше. А по-друге, вони деякий час готувались до нашого контрнаступу, обстрілювали трішки не так часто, тому економили боєприпаси і зараз не економлять, стріляють.
For all the simulation and noise, the reality on the front has been ugly, brutal. They show us this video, taken from a dead Russian, that shows his tank trying to escape. The Ukrainians know this horror too.
Завжди виїжджає ворожі танки та відпрацьовують нас артилерія. І все, що в них є. У мене тут помер кращий друг, рідний дядько та батько кращого друга.
It will be real again all too soon. Heavy losses fueling their steps forwards.
Now, Wolf, we can't tell you everything we see here owing to Ukrainian military reporting restrictions, but there are certain definite clear signs that the counteroffensive may well be getting underway. So vitally strategic for Ukraine to use the NATO support training and vehicles to inflict proper damage on Russia's position in occupied areas here and liberate more territory. Wolf?
Nick Paton Walsh in Zaporizhia. Stay safe over there. Thank you very much. And joining me now from the White House, the National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communications, retired Rear Admiral John Kirby. John, thanks so much for joining us. Some of the drones shot down over Ukraine today had rather ominous messages written on them. One of them had, and I'm quoting now, "For Moscow." Another had, "For the Kremlin." Does Ukraine need to brace right now for further Russian retaliation?
The Ukrainians have been bracing for continued air assaults from Russia, whether it's cruise missiles or drones, such as some of the drones that you just talked about, Wolf. And that's why we've been prioritizing air defense capabilities for them. And look, just look over the last 24 hours or so. The Russians killed almost 24, or actually maybe more than 24 Ukrainians. Some of them were just shopping in the supermarket through these cruise missile and drone attacks. So look, it's been a constant barrage that Ukraine has been under. And whether the Russians want to use this alleged drone attack as some sort of pretext, I can tell you that the Ukrainians are going to want to be, and they will be ready.
The former Russian President Dmitry Medvedev is actually calling for what he said would be the elimination of the Ukrainian President Zelensky. Has the U.S. conveyed to the Kremlin the consequences if Russia were to carry out an assassination of the Ukrainian leader?
I don't know that we've had direct conversations with him about Mr. Medvedev's comments here, just recently, but we have clearly sent strong messages publicly and privately to Russia about what they're doing in Ukraine. It's illegal, it's unprovoked, it needs to stop. And in the meantime, we're doing everything we can to make sure that President Zelensky and his armed forces can continue to defend themselves. But look, the Russians have made no bones about the fact that they want to decapitate the Zelensky administration. They've made no bones about the fact that civilians are certainly in the realm of the possible in terms of their targeting, and they've made no bones about the fact that they don't believe Ukraine should even exist as an independent state.
I know you've slammed Russia for, quote, lying that the United States allegedly directed that drone strike on the Kremlin. But what tools does the U.S. have right now to find out who was actually behind that alleged drone strike?
Look, I don't think we're going to try to investigate this, Wolf. I mean, this, whether it happened or not, it's not the kind of thing that I think we're going to invest a lot of time in investigating. Clearly, we'd like to learn more about that, and we'll continue to do that and talking to the Ukrainians and trying to do the best we can to piece it together. But we're not on a big fact-finding mission here. What we are on a mission to do is make sure that Ukraine can continue to defend itself, give them the tools, the capabilities, the training that they need as they get ready to conduct operations here in the spring when the weather gets better.
Would Russia have an incentive, John, to stage what's called a false flag operation just ahead of its annual Victory Day and the expected Ukrainian counteroffensive that everyone anticipates will begin in the coming days?
We can't rule out that that's not part of their calculus. I mean, it's certainly right out of the Russian playbook to do that kind of thing. But I want to stress, Wolf, we do not know what happened here. We're not speculating. We're not hypothesizing. I'm not calling it a false flag operation. But clearly, look, the Russians have conducted false flag operations in the past. It's a playbook. It's a play from their playbook that we could expect that they might want to pull on again. But I mean, again, I want to go back to what I said before. I mean, they continually fly cruise missiles and drones at civilian infrastructure inside Ukraine. It's not as if Mr. Putin needs to go find an excuse to try to visit violence on the Ukrainian people. He's been doing it at an accelerated rate over just the last few days.
Does the U.S. accept Ukraine's denials about this? Because, as you know, some of those leaked classified documents show Ukraine had previously planned to attack Moscow, and there's been a string of recent attacks on Russian soil.
Well, look, the Ukrainians spoke very plainly about this. They did deny that. We'll let them speak for themselves, and certainly we noted that they came out very, very quickly and said that they had nothing to do with it. Again, we're not going to conduct an investigation here. What we want to do is make sure that Ukraine can defend itself. That's where the focus is.
John Kirby over at the White House. Thank you very much.